This is Hunter Bledsoe with Baseball Think Tank. Today we're going to be expanding on the whiteboard discussion that we had in a previous video, talking about matching the hands and the feet in the load process of the swing. And like I discussed in the previous video, I feel like it's something that we spend very little time working on, but I believe it is more important than the mechanics of the swing itself. What is the load? We talked about that in the previous video. It's two distinct parts, a gather and a separation. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the gather portion of the load. Some things that I see people do well, some things that they don't do so well, some things to look at to avoid, and some feelings that I really try to create in this process. So I know I discussed in the previous video about getting something going back. So the gather is where energy is stored. I need to get energy going back before I can have it go forward into the swing. And where do I store it? How do I store it? And then ultimately, how do I match my hands and my feet in this process? So if we think about the gather or the load and the gather portion of that, it's trying to get energy into the most critical part of my body where I can produce the most force and most power, and that's in my back hip. And so to start out, if we're in an athletic position, what do we want to think about, or how do we want to think about getting energy into my hip if I'm having something moving back? A common thing that I see in a lot of people that is wrong, in essence creates problems, is you see people sway back, and when you see that, you see their knee go past the inside of their foot, and oftentimes you see weight get to the outside of their back foot. And if that's happening when I do that, and if you're sitting there doing that as I'm doing it, you don't feel anything in your back hip. You need to be able to feel like there's a pressure in your back hip and there's actually energy being stored in that region of your body. So let's address this first problem that I see with the back foot, and how do we correct that. So the outside of the foot, getting energy to that, if we deem that's bad, then I need to find a way that I can get energy to consistently feeling that I never get it to the outside of my foot, it always stays on the inside of my foot. And it's something that there are products out there very similar to this that are on sale for hundreds of dollars. And this is a very easy thing to make. All it is a 2x4 in plywood. Taking the plywood and cutting it in a foot section by 2 foot section, so a foot by 2 feet, and then on the back side of it, nailing a 2x4. And what this allows me to do, if I put my foot on the inside of it, if I have weight go to the outside of my foot, as you can see, it rocks the board. And so I don't want that to happen. I want energy to stay in my hip. I want weight to stay towards the inside of my back foot in the gather portion of my load. So as I do this, I want to feel that board stay at an angle on the ground, as you can see that, all right, in the demonstration. So that's a very easy way to make something for $4, $5, $6 and use it to your advantage. It's a very great tool, in my opinion. So expanding on that. So once I've done that a few times and I get that feeling, another thing that I can do if I don't want to make that board is I can just take the weight and turn my ankle, the inside of my ankle, down towards the ground. And what you see when I do that, all right, is it shifts my knee, all right, inside of my foot. And that's the next critical component as we work up this chain of what you want to see in the load process, is that the knee always stays inside of the back foot. Now, as I'm doing that properly, right? So the weight is staying to the inside of my foot, my knee is staying to the inside of my foot. I feel a lot of pressure building up in my back hip. All right? So that is where I want to get energy. I want to feel that pressure because I know if I'm doing that, the backward energy that I'm starting is becoming stored in the right place. And it'll allow me to kind of hang out in that area in essence. And that leads into the separation of my load, which we'll discuss in a future video. But it allows me to begin to recognize pitches. All right, when I can get energy there, I can start to recognize pitches and understand the timing of when I need to begin separation. So those are just a few mechanical points to how to set up, in essence, to get energy to my back hip. Another problem that you're going to run into, and one that you can also look at doing, is a lot of people will load, when they load back, they'll load their quad. So you may not see energy go this way, all right? You may just see it kind of sit down on that leg, right? And if I do that, when I do that, if you're practicing this at home, is you'll start to feel a lot of pressure in your quad. All right, you'll start to feel those muscles in your quad activate. Like that's now where you're storing energy. And as we've mentioned previous, the energy needs to be stored in my hip. All right, so I need to get away from storing it in my quad, because here's the problems that creates. What do we do when we jump, right? We load and we spring. All right, so if I load my quad, one of the first things that quad is going to want to do is it's going to want to spring out of my swing, which is a no-no, it's bad. Or I'm going to know that I'm not supposed to do that, and I'm going to overcompensate by sitting down on my back leg. So I'm here, now I know I don't want to spring, so I sit down to compensate. Another problem, all right, that we've created out of this. So why I stress so much that the load and what we do within the load is more important than the actual mechanics of my swing is because 90% of all errors in my swing are derived and originated because I don't know how to load properly. I don't know how to load properly, one, and then secondly, doing it on time and in sequence. So let's now that we've addressed a couple of those issues, let's actually talk about what goes on. All right, and what it means to gather properly, and the main point, match my hands to my feet. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate this, right? So if I'm in an athletic position and I feel a gather, I can do this a multitude of ways. I know we've talked about that in the previous video, that Albert Pujols may do it different than Jose Bautista, or they may do it differently than Prince Fielder. Now I'm going to demonstrate everything right-handed because that's what my natural side is, and so you can get a better idea of what I'm doing from that side. But so let's look at Albert, right, per se, and his gather. So Albert's setup is similar to this. Now, as you see him, he does this in the pre-movement of his gather. So what he's doing is he's pressing energy into, as you can see, my hip. I'm not sitting down on my leg. I'm not rolling out. I'm compressing energy, and when I do that, I feel energy in my back hip. All right? Bautista doesn't do a lot with his hands in the movement. He just lifts up. But as you can see, I'm still maintaining angle, and when I do that, I almost feel a little cramp in my hip. All right? Meaning I'm getting energy into the point I want to. And then I'll do a right-handed version of Prince. Prince kind of steps back. Right? Bonds did the same thing. So they step back, but as you can see, I'm still not shifting weight to my outside. I'm still not compressing or sitting down on my back leg. All right? So the key points to the gather relative to energy in my hip is getting an awareness of where the energy needs to be stored and what the feeling is of what I'm trying to do, how I'm trying to get energy into my back hip. The final point to this is the hands and the feet working together and loading the hands in essence, or not allowing them to move back, because I don't want my hands moving backwards until my foot is moving forward. That's the separate. We will discuss that in the next video. But that is the separation part of my load. What happens in the gather portion is my hands are going to, in essence, kind of work opposite of what my foot is doing. So when you see somebody step back, they're kind of compressing energy this way. So their hands need to match that, right? So when somebody steps back, I need to have this vertical type movement to match that. In Albert's setup, you see him turn this way with his lead leg. That's why you see him start to turn and tip the barrel to match that. As you can see in both of these illustrations, it's an equal and opposite motion, and it's at the same rate of speed. So I'm not going slow here and fast here. All right, I'm not going slow and fast. I'm trying to match, or I'm trying to match the timing of how I set my hands and my feet working together. That is a demonstration of the gather portion of the load, and the takeaway point is to remember, where do I store energy? I'm trying to get energy into my back hip.